alaikum and a very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Shakir Zainal and I'm the head of Mohammed bin Rashid Innovation Fund, joining you for the insightful innovation journey session, where we bring you conversation with innovators, deep dive into their experience, which in turn helps other founders learn how to accelerate their growth and maximize impact. This session will run for approximately 45 minutes, of which 25 to 30 minutes are usually allocated for main discussion, followed by Q&A session, lasting for a maximum of 15 minutes. Please type your question in the comment section throughout, and we will do our best to post as many of them as we can with today's guests during the Q&A. So moving quickly onto our guests for this episode, I'm excited to introduce Sophie Smith, founder and CEO of Nabta Health, a hybrid healthcare company accelerating the detection, diagnosis, and treatment of chronic diseases in women in emerging markets. Prior to founding Nabta, Sophie worked as a technology consultant for Accenture and has launched a number of impact startups like myZindagi and Le Plastic. In early 2022, Sophie founded the 2022 Female Angels Movement to bring gender parties to the early stage investment landscape by identifying and publicly listing 2022 female angel investor for MENA by end of 2022. Sophie's lifetime ambition is to empower all the women to effectively manage their health. So without further ado, let's get Sophie into this episode and let's have some questions maybe, and let's see how did she start her journey. Sophie, no doubt you have a notable educational background, very, very solid professional credential as well. But tell us how a history major at the University of Cambridge dives into a career of tech.
I think it was more, how did someone who was probably meant to be an engineer end up reading history? I come from a family of doctors and engineers. And ever since I was little, I've been building things. My mother has pictures of these giant castles I used to make out of paper when I was 2, and I would do the different floors and all of the furniture and the characters inside very intricately out of paper. And I've always been making things, I think, for as long as I can remember. But for whatever reason, in spite of this, no one at any point said to me, "Hey, Sophie, have you thought about becoming an engineer?" So I didn't. And I went and studied the subject that I was best at school, which was history. And actually, when I was at Cambridge, I got involved through a guy I was dating at the time with building and testing one of the first truly artificially intelligent systems for spoken dialogue management. So this was a system that was developed back when AI was split in terms of language models into 2 completely separate areas. You had NLP, so natural language programming on one side, and you had probabilistic methods on the other. Now, most AI and generative AI combines the 2 things. So I got involved with testing a system that eventually went on to become a company called Vocal IQ, acquired by Apple in 2015 for £100 million. And it's now being used to build their next generation voice assistant called Jarvis. And when I got involved testing the system, I learned how to program, became very interested in code, became very interested in software development, and went from there to work for Accenture as a technology consultant, but not on the strategy side, on the being plugged into routers, trying to work out, what circuits we could turn on and off side. And I worked at Accenture then as a technology consultant for 4 years, got a little bit fed up of having my learning curve dictated to me. So I left and in 2014 started my first company.
Wow, fantastic. I was just listening to you, and I have 4 kids, so I have to maybe notice actually what are they playing with and what are they building, if they were building anything. But that I have to do that now. I think that's what I learned.
Oh, I'm always looking at my children, trying to work out what they're building. In fact, I was asked before I came on, how I was feeling. And honestly, mostly today, I'm just grateful that I'm not in labor because I had baby number 4 due this week.
Okay. Wow. Okay. See, I mean, what is all the more interesting in the chain of events that led to your genesis of Nabta Health? Take us along on that journey, please. I mean, how your career so far informed your experiences.
So I think I've always been bothered on a very deep level by systemic injustice. And nowhere did this seem to be more prevalent than in what historically have been defined by the West as emerging markets, but actually emerging and overtaking the rest of the world markets is how we should really think about them. When I was 18, I created a kind of memorandum for a social enterprise called MAD that stood for Making a Difference. And the premise for this enterprise was that it taught young people in the BRIC countries to do ethical business. So I've always been interested in, I think, emerging or underserved markets. 2 of the 4 companies that I had before NABTA were based in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. So my second company, Synapse, which built a platform, myZindagi, a doctor finding appointment booking platform, was headquartered in Pakistan, in defense in Lahore. I spent a lot of time there in 2015. Bounced back from there to build a software development company that worked mostly with health tech or healthcare companies in the UK, called 224. And then after that, I set up a plastic recycling company in Sierra Leone that just wastes plastics to roads. And they're all quite different businesses in quite different places. But I think what I was trying to arrive at was the problem I really wanted to solve. I remember going with my very first company to Web Summit in Ireland, and we actually pitched what was a kind of metaverse for very, very early for the education and job finding space. So rather than just looking through kind of job descriptions online, you'd go and you would exist within these workplaces in a virtual environment. And after this pitch, I was chatting to a couple of investors, and one of them was just like, Sophie, this is not what you were supposed to be doing with your life. And I remember I was really offended. I was like, what do you mean this isn't what I was supposed to be doing with my life? He was like, you don't want it enough. I have no doubt that you'll be very successful with whatever it is that you end up doing, but this is not it. And I remember thinking, what on earth does he mean? I don't want it enough. And I'm being very conflicted because I thought, well, I want to have a family. I want to have children. Am I ever going to want whatever this is, this business, enough? And that, I think, took me through this early stage of having these first 4 companies until I moved to the UAE in 2016. And I went and speak at a conference in Kuwait on diabetes. And there I got chatting to the organizer, not about diabetes, but about the fact that I was pregnant at the time with my first baby. A fact that fascinated him. And about a month later, he sent me a whole lot of stats on women's health in the region and said, do you want to do something on women's health together? And as soon as he did that, as soon as stats, I had that kind of light bulb moment where I was like, this is a problem that I care about. This is the business that I want to run. And over the years, we founded Nabta 21st of March 2017. I've come to understand what that investor in London meant when he said, you have to want it enough. It doesn't mean that it's the only thing that you want. It doesn't mean that you love and treasure other things in your life, but it does mean that in the quiet moments that you have, when you could be thinking about anything or doing anything, the thing in your head is your business and the problem you're trying to solve. When you're driving to pick up your children from work, when you're showering, when you are awake at night staring at the ceiling, the thing that occupies your thoughts and you're never bothered by it occupying your thoughts is your business. That's when you know that you want it enough.
That is the truly impressive, Sophie. So, you seem to have a penchant for doubling in industries and domains are not really known to be female centric. There is a difference in how women experience these arenas. How did you handle this, and what kept you really going?
So I think the fact that the world embodies at the moment, probably across industries and in all corners of the world, systemic gender and racial biases is something that I became familiar with and very uncomfortable about slightly later on in life. So, I'm the oldest of 8 children. We're 4 boys and 4 girls. We grew up treated exactly the same opportunities, of my youngest sibling, actually, who's quite a lot younger than me. I'm the eldest, is just going off to university next year. Of the 8 of us, 5 of us went to Oxford or Cambridge, and the rest have gone to, again, like good universities in the UK. We all enjoy similar pursuits. We were all allowed to do sports. We were not treated differently at all. And then I left education and entered the workforce, and suddenly it became apparent that there was this difference between men and women. And then I had children, and suddenly the differences in terms of expectations and opportunities and the ability to maintain a work-life balance and just to develop as a person in every way was fundamentally different. And then I started a business, and then I started to fundraise for the business. And again, the difference in terms of access and outcomes for men versus women, again, very different. We've witnessed in the last 3 years the percentage of venture capital that goes into female-founded companies in MENA drop 3 years in a row. So it went from 2.2% in 2020 to 1.9% in 2021 to 1.3% in 2022. And it's difficult to explain the lived reality of that statistic, that you feel it when you go to pitch the company, that when you pitch the growth potential of your sector and of your business and the opportunity, the massive opportunity that is there. And this is particularly true of women's health and women's health technologies, a massively underserved area. The likelihood of you capitalizing on that potential, the belief in your potential as an individual and in the potential of the business to achieve the things that you say it can is substantially less. I've sat in front of investors and I've explained that if we look at comparable companies in the US, for example, Maven Clinic, the Femtech's first unicorn, now valued at $1.3 billion US, it's raised $292.1 million, and is revenue generating to justify that valuation, which is unusual in the tech industry. If we look at the potential that's there in the market, the average acquisition price for femtech companies is over $300 million US. We haven't seen that here. But when I explained that, we have a hybrid membership-based model, and we are the only company still after 6 years that is doing in this region what we are doing, that we have the opportunity to build something to rival, even surpass the likes of Maven Clinic in the US, rather than, high five or fist bump me, investors sit back and they cross their arms and they go, let's see. And that's not an experience that is universal among entrepreneurs, that inability to see and believe in the potential of businesses that are built here. But I think these differences in opinion and in experience, these are actually the things that really motivate me. I have a super strong, incredibly independent, I always tell people she was just born 30% extra daughter. She's 4 years old, but my goodness me, is she determined. And I would say, I see the daughters of all of my friends, and they know what they want. The moment they're born, they rule the house. They are fiery, impressive characters. And sometimes I wonder, with these girls that we make, at what point does society change them? At what point do they lose that? At what point do they stop being people who are capable of changing the world and become something else? So I'm motivated by my daughter, soon to be daughters, I'm very motivated by this sense of kind of injustice in all areas, and to address it, and to make sure that for women we have equity in terms of equal opportunities, to build the way we want to build, and also to live and experience life in terms of our health, again, in an equal way and the way it should be.
Great. So maybe talking a little bit about the company and the startup. So what were the main challenges you faced? I mean, when you did your startup, and how did you tackle them?
I think our greatest challenge as a company has also been our greatest privilege. We were the first women's health technology company in the Arab world. We founded Nabta in 2017, a year after the term femtech was coined by Iditin, the founder of Clue. So the sector was very nascent globally, but it was completely uncharted territory here. And so, we were the first in the market, which means that it has been a challenge getting people to understand what femtech is, why it is a huge opportunity from a company building and from an investment perspective. I did my first interview with CNBC Arabia on the topic, what is femtech, at the start of this year, and all I could think was, it only took 6 years. But I think it's been a great privilege to then, be a sort of leader in the ecosystem and to support other femtech companies as they've emerged, and to help them on their journey and their fundraising journey. We are still very, very far behind other sectors in terms of investment. As Nabta, we have been funded just over $2 million in 6 years, and that was to get us through 5.5 years of R&D as well, to the tune of $2 million from 45 angel investors. To date, there still hasn't been a substantive venture capital or institutional investment into a women's health technology or femtech company in the region. So I'm hoping that in the next couple of years will change, because that will make it a lot easier for companies like us to grow. It will also make the market much more attractive for other women or men who are thinking about building solutions for women's health issues in the region.
Yeah. Again, it's never been an easy journey. I mean, startups are very challenging, and a lot of challenges are popping up, and you can see how the economic dynamic is also changing. So how did you experience so far, inform your work with the 2022 female angels movement, and how was your experience any different as a female investors?
So I think the 2022 female angel movement was founded actually out of frustration and a little bit by accident. So we were at the point in our fundraising journey where we were raising our seed, which was a $1.5 million round. We set up a special purpose vehicle so that we could take very small tickets. We wanted more women to invest in the company without crowding our cap table. And we were kind of searching for publicly listed female angel investors in MENA. And on the one list that we found, there were 2. And I thought, well, this isn't going to do. So I put a post on LinkedIn saying, I'm starting a movement to identify 2022 female angel investors for MENA. And you should never post that you're going to start a movement unless you really intend to start a movement, because it got a huge response. Within about 2 weeks, we put together a steering committee of 30 or so individuals who, on a voluntary basis, have since then committed to getting these 2022 female angel investors listed. And then once we have them kind of on a list, and that's available on 2022femaleangels.com, educating them and empowering them to become effective and active angel investors. So not only investing $5,000 or $10,000, here or there in a sort of haphazard manner into a couple of startups, but really becoming involved in financing the startup ecosystem. And so, again, only 15% of angel investors globally are female. Probably that statistic is skewed because actually a lot of men end up handing over assets to their female counterparts in order to avoid or evade taxes. But we want to increase that number. In fact, what we would like is for the MENA region to be leading in terms of the number of active female angel investors. So we have a list now of about 350. I'm pleased that at this point we're ahead of similar lists in places like Europe. But the goal is to keep growing that ecosystem. And we know, although it's not the primary goal of the movement, we know that if we have more diversity in terms of investor profiles, we will see more diverse investments as well. So there is a secondary aim of this movement, which is to get more capital into female-founded companies in the region. But it's not why we started the movement. We started the movement to get women investing, to get them excited about it, to get them to understand the beauty of being involved with all these interesting companies building things, to make sure that discussions over coffee start with, so what did you invest in this week? That's what we'd like to see, I think, with the movement in the ecosystem.
Great. From what I heard, you have started your journey in 2017. So what are some of the significant development according to you, and what do you think the future holds?
Significant developments in terms of Nabta is that we've actually very proudly defined this entirely new model of hybrid healthcare. So back in 2018, after spending about 15 months in the discovery phase of R&D, trying to work out what we could build that would effectively scale across the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, where infrastructure, access, and education are very disparate. We ended up with this model and this term that we coined, hybrid healthcare, which combined digital and traditional care along clinical pathways for specific chronic diseases, to reduce the time from pre-symptom to diagnosis, and then to give women the opportunity to manage those diagnosed conditions more effectively. We published a book chapter on hybrid healthcare in 2019, and then we actually ended up publishing a full book with Springer, with contributions from thought leaders around the world on this hybrid healthcare model. And today, the vast majority of successful companies in the health tech space in the US and Europe are moving from whatever model they had previously, whether it's to digital or traditional, to hybrid models as per our definition, and referring to them as hybrid healthcare. So that's been a really cool thing, to see that the model that we came up with works and is increasingly becoming the norm in terms of care delivery. And then in terms of Nabta itself, we got through R&D. I still think our greatest achievement to date is that we survived COVID, survived what is sort of still a slightly prevailing lack of real and capital-backed interest in the sector. We have a full hybrid model now in-house that we've developed here in the UAE. We're commercializing through, it's a hybrid membership-based model, so we're effectively commercializing it. We've just set up in Saudi. We have quite aggressive expansion plans for Saudi this year, and from Saudi we will start going into different countries in Africa. So, our goal when we founded Nabta was to IPO by 2027, somewhere between 2025 and 2027, with over 1,000 clinics and supporting our hybrid platform kind of in the region. And the goal with IPOing was to be owned, not only to be serving women, but to be owned by those women that we're serving, so that they had the opportunity to really contribute to and dictate, where we go next, which chronic diseases we look at next, how we build what we build. So I think we're on track to do that, which is exciting. And we've also seen the femtech ecosystem start to develop here. When we did MBRF back in 2019, I was accompanied then by my daughter, actually, who was about 2 months old. She came to all the meetings. I've got pictures of her sat on the tables in the in Emirates Towers. And when we did MBRF, we said we believe the UAE can become a global hub for innovation in health tech, and specifically and immediately can become a hub for innovation in health tech in emerging markets. And I think we're starting to see that kind of vision and aspiration realized as well.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, listening to you, and if you look back in your journey as an entrepreneur and innovator, I mean, would have done anything differently?
That is a horrendously difficult question. The problem with doing anything differently is you change one thing and suddenly like 1,000 other things are also unpicked and undone. I don't think I'd have had the choice to do anything differently, you know. So much of what has and has not happened has been entirely outside of my control. You know, you can't change the mindset, particularly towards a sector, particularly towards potential of a people, of a world in some ways, because, you know, the fact that women were excluded from clinical trials until 1993 is not a regional issue. You know, the fact that 19% of clinical trial participants globally today are female is not a regional issue. The fact that 92% of clinical trials occur in the US and Europe, and 8% occur in the Far East, meaning that the vast majority of women of Middle Eastern, African, and South Asian origin are excluded from clinical trials is not really a regional issue. You know, the only way that you can change things is by building and leading by example. And when you build, you know, there's a lot that you can control and do, but there are external forces that you're subject to that you can do nothing about. I have loved every minute of my journey with Nabta. Again, I think in this world of many complex issues, being able to build and to employ people is a great privilege. And so that's all that we do, is continue to build and get people thinking a little bit differently and making access to healthcare a little bit easier for previously underserved women in the region over the next decade, 2 decades, 50 years, however long it is. I'll be happy with that. I wouldn't change anything.
Great. So we have 15 more minutes left, so maybe it's a time to move to. I was looking at the comments. I've seen a lot of questions. Maybe we need to move to the questions right now, and let's take the first question from Mobina. What would you say was the proudest or career definition moment for your career?
I think it's funny also is that when you build a company, I don't really think I've thought about my career since I left Accenture. It's been much less about me and aspirations I had for myself professionally, and much more about what we were building and the impact that we could have. But in the context of that, I think there are a couple of different things, and you know, it's not a moment that manifested itself as that moment in time. But for example, when I was 10 days postpartum with my second child, we pitched at the AI Everything conference, and we came second. We won $25,000. And when they were announcing the prizes up on stage, I was actually breastfeeding my daughter in the toilet, and I heard faintly over the tannoy, "Could Sophie Smith come to the AI stage?" I thought, oh man. So I packed and bundled this baby up. I ran out of the toilet, buggy flying everywhere, ran over to the stage, went straight up onto the stage holding the baby, and collected the check. And one of the judges, firstly, was very surprised to see this baby, but he was so moved by it that he came up to me afterwards to speak to me, and he said he remembered how hard things had been for his wife after they had their babies, and how it was so great that you know, having a family was something that I was doing alongside having the business. And this guy turned out to be Cheng Yu Lin, who was the head of innovation for INSEAD. And we stayed in touch. And a couple of years later, he wrote a case study on Nabta for Harvard and INSEAD that was published. And then another year later, we were featured in a Harvard Business Review article that he contributed to. And then another year later, we were selected as the company for INSEAD's Master Strategist Day, which is a 24-hour window where INSEAD gets together its 500 students across the 2 campuses in Fontainebleau and in Singapore. And these 500 students try to solve a strategic growth question for one company globally. So last year, that was us. And they came to Dubai and they filmed us in Dubai for 3 days. And they also wrote up quite an extensive case study. And then we got to do this. And with these 500 incredibly bright minds, that gave us a lot of very, very valuable insights and things to think about. And at that event, the sponsor turned out to be, it was an ex-INSEAD alum, a guy who founded the largest car insurance company in the UK, also large presence in the US. And about 3 or 4 months later, he became one of our largest single ticket angel investors. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because it's the little things that you do and the things that you don't think about and the things that you persist with that seem insignificant at the time that kind of build over time. And so the significance of this, like that moment of rushing up on stage with this little baby, which at the time I would never have said was a career-defining moment, later, 3-4 years down the line, became a career-defining moment. So yeah, in your careers and in the things that you do, don't be afraid to be brave in a moment. You might not see the results immediately, but they will bear fruit further down the line.
Great. So we have another question from Dana. Could you tell us about particular app features, integrations that makes Nabta successful?
I think one of the things about the hybrid platform that we have that makes Nabta successful is that we're very open. You know, the 3 pillars of hybrid healthcare are patient centricity, augmented intelligence, and decentralization. And what we mean by decentralization is that ultimately we believe women should be the owners of their own health data, the primary architects of their own health, and should be able to take their health care as it exists and go anywhere in the world and have people access it, you know, and help them appropriately. And what that means is having a fairly open platform, you know, where you're not rigid about the way that you own or share data, although obviously, you know, data privacy, etc., is very important, but you allow women to be flexible. You're open to integrating with existing solutions in the market. You understand that at some point your users might decide that they want nothing more to do with you and to take their data and leave, and that's absolutely fine, and in fact is their right. So I think, you know, we didn't try to build our own telehealth function. We partnered with Okadoc, which is a local telehealth provider. We didn't try to build our own electronic medical record. We partnered with Practo, or used Practo by Instapract. So we've been very open-minded and collaborative in the way that we work. I think what makes our platform unique is that from a technical perspective, we haven't built our machine learning at the symptom stage, because one of the things that we realized from speaking to millions of women now actually across the MENA region is that many women don't recognize symptoms as symptoms. So you might not think, or you might write off the fact that you're tired all the time because you've got 3 kids under 5, and of course you're tired all the time. You might write off the fact that you have to sit down while you're making school lunches again because you've got 3 kids under 5 and you're tired all the time. You might not know that actually those could be symptoms of a particular condition, a condition that can be diagnosed and managed. And if you don't know that something isn't a symptom, it doesn't matter how many brilliant symptom checkers there are out there, you're never going to download one and input, I'm tired all the time as a symptom. But what every woman can tell you is what her major pain point or health issue or goal is at any one point in time. I'm trying to lose weight. I want to fix my skin. I can't fall pregnant. I keep losing babies. And so we built our machine learning at that stage. We do everything in a goal-oriented way. So we allocate a holistic care team to women on the basis of their goal. We map predicted symptoms to women on the basis of their goal, their age, their stage. And then we take them down these clinical pathways to help diagnose them with specific conditions, again, based on their goal, their age, and their stage. And any advice that we give them, so rather than taking or diagnosing a disease, pinning a person to that disease and treating the disease, which is how traditional healthcare works. And the model was predominantly designed to deal with acute rather than chronic diseases. We pin diseases to the person, and then we treat the underlying factors of those diseases based on the age, stage, and the goal of the person.
So we have a question from Sarah. How is the Nabta Health helping users by leveraging personalized care pathways?
So I think potentially the easiest way to answer this is to talk about the first clinical pathway we built for the diagnosis of polycystic ovary syndrome. So PCOS is a condition that is implicated in 70% of female infertility. It's a very, very common hormonal condition. It has two key underlying factors. One is insulin resistance, and the other is chronic inflammation. And it's characterized by three symptoms: irregular or anovulatory cycles, so cycles in which you do not ovulate an egg, elevated levels of testosterone, so the primary male hormone, and then polycystic ovaries, so where you have these like little sort of follicular cysts that look like a sort of necklace of pearls around the rim of the ovary. And despite the fact that PCOS is so common, it's also 70% miss or undiagnosed. And if you're not ovulating, and if your testosterone levels are high, then it makes it very difficult or impossible for you to fall pregnant. The thing is that, firstly, the clinical pathway that we built, because we combine digital and traditional care, and we identify the symptoms in a specific order, allows us to detect it with 99% accuracy in 90 days, as opposed to 30% accuracy in 2.5 years, which is the global average. But we also, what we do post-diagnosis changes depending on the goal of the woman. How you treat or support a woman in managing PCOS is very different if she is trying to lose weight versus wanting to fall pregnant, versus already pregnant, versus newly postpartum. And again, because the way that traditional healthcare works is very disease-centric, there's really only one kind of first-line treatment for PCOS, which is actually the prescription of hormonal contraceptives. And it doesn't take into account the age, stage, or the goal of the woman. So that's how we're different. Not only are the clinical pathways that we put women through or down different in terms of their makeup, in terms of the different elements that help a doctor get from pre-symptoms diagnosis for a patient, or our platform in this case, but the treatment options that we recommend to women are also different depending on who they are and what they want.
Yeah, so we have a question from Dina. What advice would you give to other women who are interested in starting a femtech company or pursuing a career in the femtech industry?
I would say go for it. There are so many things to do in women's health. A recent analysis of the market by Femtech Focus in partnership with Crunchbase suggested that the femtech market will be worth $1.186 trillion by 2027, vastly above where it was estimated to be at even 10 years ago. So conditions that specifically affect women have historically been much less researched. I mean, only 2% of funding into health tech, or I think it's now 4% last year, goes to femtech specifically, and that's also reflected in healthcare. So research into ways to manage everything from PMS to postpartum depression to menopause, it's lacking. There are massive gaps, and where there's a gap, there's an opportunity. I think this ecosystem now here in MENA, it's a fabulous place to build a company, the UAE. There's such a huge growth mindset. It's a very buoyant ecosystem. It's growing faster every year. It, in terms of its geographical proximity, is very close to other, actual emerging markets in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. And the next billion people are coming out of Africa. So whatever you build here has huge potential in terms of uptake. I would say go for it. Every time someone sends me a sort of link to a new femtech company in the industry, I think expecting to be like, competition. All I can think is, and my response always is, thank goodness. One, we have hundreds of femtech companies in the Middle East doing hundreds of different and interesting things. We'll get to a point where, as a sector, we can't be ignored. Venture capital and other institutional money must flow our way, because the proof that there is a need and the interest is there. So please, if anyone who's listening is thinking about starting a femtech company, don't wait, do it today.
Okay, fantastic. So we have, I think, because of the time, I think this is the last question from Sarah. Where would you say the state of women healthcare sits now in UAE versus the highest ranked nations? And what do you think needs to be done to move UAE to the rankings?
So I think in terms of the UAE, firstly, we need more data. So there's a huge amount of health data available on women's health in other parts of the world. There's very limited publicly available data here. So in order to be able to effectively rank the UAE, full stop, we need more publicly available data about women's health broad spectrum. We need more women's health offerings that are available within corporates. We're seeing companies increasingly announce kind of DE, so diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. We need to see those implemented, even mandated by the government. And we need to see, we need to be able to see kind of measurable effects of the implementation and introduction of health policies as part of those DE&I initiatives. Again, the UAE has some of the best medical facilities in the world. It's increasingly attracting some of the most competent medical professionals in the world. The way it will continue to do that is to really establish itself as a center of excellence in healthcare. And the way it will do that is by investing money and making non-dilutive funding available for R&D. Because if you have a healthy research and development, a kind of academic ecosystem, you will attract top doctors who want to publish. You will attract top doctors who want to do research. You will create this very deeply rooted sense of excellence and sort of industry-leading knowledge that will build the ecosystem, will increase the quality of the healthcare provided, will make it more uniform, will make it more uniformly available to women regardless of their background or the level of their insurance coverage. So I think a couple of things. I think women's healthcare in the UAE needs more data in order to be effectively ranked against nations in other parts of the world. And then once we have that, we need to make sure that we concentrate on attracting companies that really want to build and create intellectual property here, so that can feed into the ecosystem, so that we'll attract the right doctors and continue to move us up the rankings in terms of the medical care we provide.
Okay, so I think that seems to be all the time we have today, Sophie. So I would like to seriously thank you for your valuable time and generous insight. As usually, I keep reiterating that I wanted to thank everybody, especially the audience, and I hope they all enjoyed the session, and I hope they keep looking up, because we have these series every 1 month or 2 months. We keep organizing these episodes. Sophie, thank you very much. It was my pleasure to host you today, and hopefully we'll be in touch.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you. Masalam.
Masalama.